All right, let's do it. Welcome back, or I guess to me, welcome back to all you. Welcome continuation. Sorry I missed last week. I had a wedding out in Oakland. Volume in the back, thumbs up, thumbs down. Volume in the back, thumbs up, thumbs down. Volume in the front, is it blowing your eardrums off? Nope. All right. And at any time, if you can't hear me because I come away from the microphone, just give a holler. Even if I'm talking, interrupt me and give a holler. Okay, today is modules. I missed last class. I heard Ben took over. If there's, awesome. Cool. That's awesome. Today is modules. If you do have any questions from objects last time, you can feel free to ask them during this class also when we talk about modules. So let's do it. Agenda for today, 2-minute, a quick instructor note. It should be pretty basic. The stages of coming to class. And then a lecture talking about modules, talking about importing modules locally, like things you've written, and then importing modules externally, things that other people have written. And then your studio, review all together. I'm going to try to build in some time to talk about a concept that pops up in your assignment. So I'm going to try to break some of our lecture time into that, as long as we can fit it in within, before the studio hits. So the stages of coming to class. What is the best way to come to class? And these are I just threw these together. The order in which is best to worst to come to class. So the best way to come to class is to do the readings and do the exercises and to show up to class. That seems obvious. But I put the rest of these on there because just for some reason, if you don't meet the first one, doesn't mean you give up, right? You can still incrementally do better. It's not it's not binary, right? It's not like you either show up to class and get everything done, or you do nothing and you don't show up to class. You can still show up to class if you didn't do the readings and try to get the most out of it. And you can still do the readings if you miss class and try to get the most out of it. So that's all that means. Is even if you can't finish all the stretch assignments and everything to the extra bit, do as much as you can and still come and participate and learn along with everybody else. That's it. All right, let's go to the REPL. I sent this out in Slack. Today we're going to talk about modules. Now, modules or packages, as you hear about them in other languages, yeah. It's recording right now, so that question should be on the recording. And if there's issues with the recording as far as speaking or you can't hear something or other, that's also good feedback. Something I just thought about is that question probably wasn't on the recording, so good feedback from me would be to repeat questions that are asked in class so you know what the question is as I'm answering it. Okay, in line 7. In line 7 is your classic import statement, or your classic require statement. This is how you bring in a chunk of code from another module. And whenever you see it with a path reference, which is a dot and a slash, that is how you bring code from a local environment. So what this is, line 7 is saying, hey, go locally and get me the file geometry. And I wrote a file geometry right here. So I have index, I have expenses, I have geometry, and I have Morse. But for now, we're going to talk about just geometry. Does everybody know what this dot means in a file path? Anybody raise their hand can tell me? Yeah. Yeah, it means it's in the exact same directory. So I could add a folder, which is my math folder, and you specify the whole path. So if I, in my math folder, say, well, it's not going to let me. Let's say I move geometry to my math folder. Now if I were to require it, it's going to say, I don't know where that is. Cannot find module. So these paths have to be exact when you talk about accessing them. So what this dot means is say, start in my current directory, go to the folder math, and then go to the file geometry. Now, so everybody's working with the same REPL, I'm going to move this back to the root. So now I can say require dot/geometry, and it's going to compile. It's going to say you required that module. Yeah.
It doesn't require the .js on the end? It will find it?
Correct. JavaScript, in fact, I don't even know, does it work with .js? Yeah, it still works with .js. But JavaScript knows that you're always looking for a JavaScript file. And the .js means JavaScript. If you were to put other files in here that were Ruby, they would have a .rb. Or Java would have a .java. So that extension is like what code is in the file. That's a good question, though. Before we talk about bringing things in, does anybody know what .dot means? Yeah. Yeah, one folder up. So this would say, okay, so if I go to my root or my terminal, which everybody has on their computer, and I blow it up as much as I can. So these are all the files on my computer. And I can say, okay, go to my code repository. These are all projects that I've written. And I could say, go to projects that I wrote in JavaScript. If I want to go back a level, so here I was in code, and then I went into JavaScript, I could say, take me back. And that .dot means go back a level. So I could technically, right, I could say, okay, go to JavaScript. This is going to get a little weird before we go to the other thing. I could say, go back a level, and then go back into JavaScript. Right? Because I'm saying go back, and then from there, where am I going from there? It's the same thing. But yeah, the .dot just means go back a level. Have you all ever seen that and played with the terminal before? I think that's coming for you in about a week and a half, where you're going to do almost all your coding on that terminal instead of in that browser. All right, importing modules and exporting modules. So let's work through these steps one by one. I'll do one, and then we'll release y'all to do one, then I'll do one, and we'll do them all together. So define pi in geometry.js. So I come over here to geometry, and I just say const pi equals 3.14159.265, something like that. So now I have pi defined in geometry. Cannot find module geometry when I ran the program. I need to go back here and require it from my actual root directory where I'm at, not the very beginning. Okay, so now if I want to use geometry, if I want to use something in it, this is the syntax for doing it. I would say give me geometry and give me this value in geometry. But in geometry itself, I need to write this module exports. And this module exports is Node's way of saying, hey, this is what I'm providing to everybody else. Nothing that I write in this file, in this geometry.js file, nothing is accessible unless you export it. It's all private. And that's the word that people are going to refer to it as, private. There's private things that are only in there, and there's public things which other people can access. So this is the syntax for exporting something. You say my module exports is equal to, and pi, what I want to export, is equal to my local variable, pi, what I want to export. Now, when I come over to index.js, I can say, okay, I want a console log geometry.pi. And if I'm right, then this geometry should now have pi exported. And it does. And so I can borrow that piece of code from somewhere else. Yeah, question? Yep. But I'm going to answer that question, then I'm going to go back. Yeah.
Is it appropriate to always use the object syntax when exporting from a module? Because I thought that I read that with a single module, you just do equals.
Yeah, you can. You can, but I would suggest always doing this. And in fact, I don't think in the last 4 years I've done it other than this. Yeah. But you're right, there is another way to export. And for those who are interested, you can do, module.exports equals pi. And then that's the only thing exported from this whole chunk of code. But usually you want to say, okay, what am I explicitly exporting?
Does this only work with constants and functions?
Let's find out. So what else would you want to export, do you think?
Like a regular defined variable?
So var my regular defined variable, and what would you want to set it equal to?
0.
Oh no, where'd it go?
Well, we didn't
Oh.
do constants in the reading. I didn't do that.
All right, let's do var my regular defined variable. Let's see. So then I have to figure out what to call it. I have to call it something. So I can call it the same thing. That's the normal syntax, but there's no requirement for that. I can call it whatever I want. Let's see if it's available. So I'll come back to my index.js and I run it. Well, first I delete these 2 lines of code. And I run it just to make sure it compiles. And then I'm going to console log geometry out to see what it is I'm importing. And I'm importing pi and my regular defined variable. So that means I could call my regular defined variable. So you can export an array, a function, another object, anything you want. You're just saying, hey, I wrote a piece of code over here that I think is valuable. Someone else can use it. There's no limitation on what you export. It's whatever you, the programmer, thinks is important. So I'm going to console log pi back out. So now I have access to pi. And then just to clear it up, I'm going to clear that up just a second. So now I just have module exports, and I'm just exporting pi. So the next thing I'm going to do is, okay, what if I wanted to do a circumference function, right? I wanted to be able to say somewhere in here, I wanted to be able to say function circumference. And circumference takes in a radius, and it returns, what is radius times 2 times pi? So this would be circumference, right? And I could say, what is the circumference of 4? And it should be, what's 8? It should be like 28 something. Circumference is. Good catch in the front. Oh, doesn't help if you don't console log it out. What else am I missing from my circumference function? A return statement. 25. So it wasn't 28, it was 25. So that would be how I would define a circumference function right here. Now, what I'm going to release y'all to do, and it's just going to be 2 minutes, is write that circumference function in geometry and then call it from index.js and try to get that same 25 value providing the parameter of 4. 2 minutes? Go ahead. Yeah, it's a good question because before you can call it in here, what do you have to do in geometry? Now that you wrote it, writing it isn't just good enough.
Oh, I have to
You have
call it in, HT. I need to call it in geometry as
to
well.
not call it, you need to export it.
Export.
So after you write your function in geometry, you also have to export it.
Bless you. I just wrote it. Yeah. So I wrote it and then we use this to export, right?
All right. So most people are in the midst of performing the exercise. We're going to go over it because we're going to do another one quick too. So in lines 6 through 8, I wrote my circumference function. It takes a radius and it returns the circumference. But this isn't really a challenge to know if you know about circumference. What we have to do next is export it. So I could say I also, besides exporting pi, I also want to export circumference. And as circumference, I want to export circumference. I want to export the function circumference in the object here. You can name it whatever you want. I can name it circ. It does not matter. Oh. I guess I couldn't name it whatever I wanted. Perfect?